Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. It's a cool weekend here in the Rogue Valley. We had rain yesterday and this morning was a nice balmy 47 degrees outside. And considering we're supposed to be up over 80 tomorrow, gotta love those wild swings that we can get here in Oregon in the spring. So today we're looking at a Super Wiz-66 that's in for repair. Believed carburation issues. The rest of the saw is in fairly good shape. Customer had done a lot of diagnostic work on it, and you can see there's a new fuel hose and all of that, but it wouldn't run right. And I've gotten into the carb a little bit, and I already know part of why, but I just wanted to take a look at this saw real quick as it leaks a little gas all over the bench. These things were sold all the way up until 81 or 82. It's a gear drive saw. That one looks like it might still be set with a half-pitch sprocket. Just amazing that Homelite kept these things relevant for that long, because you could also get the XP 1130, but there was still, I guess, enough demand for this style saw to keep it going. And this one's pretty clean. I don't see a UT tag on it, but definitely 70s, late 70s, just based on the type of paint, the condition of it, and those decals. Pretty cool. So anyway, Tillotson carburetor, an HL 117. So, you know, there's only so many things that can go wrong in those. The carburetor, I wanted to note, almost all of these things have got a reed block, and then the studs, and it's nutted to the carburetor. You cannot get the carb off that reed block when it's on the saw. Just take those reed valve screws, retainer screws out. You can always get to those. There's 3 or 4. This one has 3. And just remove that whole thing as a unit. Just be careful as you're pulling it loose to try not to tear the gasket. This one came off perfectly. Then once you've got the carb off the saw, you can get the throttle linkage, you know, roll it over out of the way so that you can get to those nuts and get it off. So anyway, reed valves look pretty good. Not seated as well as I'd like here at a rest, so to speak. So I'm going to try the old trick of flipping them. Just unscrew those and turn them around and see if they lay a little bit flatter. If not, I'm pretty sure I've got some in stock. This is a governed saw, given that it's a gear drive. You can see that governor linkage there. And that means there's an addition on this one of this little bracket that you can see flopping around right here. So you want to be careful to keep track of where that came off of and get it back in the same spot when you reassemble one of these carbs. Other things, the fuel turret, I had to loosen this because it was right over the top of one of those screws. You want to keep track of that clock position just as closely as possible too, so that you can get your fuel hose back on it and not end up with a kink. Obviously I've already disassembled part of this saw, or the carburetor, but I wanted to show you guys kind of what I found. And now I'm trying to do this one-handed, and we see how well that's working. Come on, there we go. So I took it apart. It had plenty of fuel still getting into it, so that at least lets us know that our tank pickup is working. Now this looks pretty clean. Didn't find anything obvious here. Diaphragm's not shot. It's still pliable. I don't see anything obstructing the passage. But when I got spacer block off, I immediately noticed, look how high that diaphragm's sitting. I mean, that's bulged. That's really high. So then, when you peel that little critter off, you get your inlet needle. And look, you get some good contrast there. See how high that inlet arm is? This thing would have been flooding to beat hell. Every little pulse from the crankcase would have just let this massive dump of fuel come in. And that needle and seat, something about this whole thing just doesn't look right. That angle looks all wrong. You can bend those arms and adjust them, but this looks like a mismatch of parts. So I'm going to take some time and go to the parts diagram for a 117C carburetor and see what should be in there. My guess is somebody had trouble sourcing the proper needle and seat and just put whatever they could find in there, and therefore we've got a big mismatch. But part 2 should cover that. I'll let you know what I find. Okay, my guess was correct. This is not the correct metering setup or inlet setup in this one, so bear with me here. I'll try and keep all this in frame and focused well. You see how the needle is actually notched into the arm? That is not correct for this style of carburetor. I think this arm might be a multi-purpose arm because the shape overall is correct. But I have a parts carburetor, a Tillotson 141D, that came off of, well, it was on my XP 1130, which it didn't belong there. But notice the difference. This is all solid right here. It's not attached to that needle. That means it uses gravity. So, you know, normally the carb is up like this, and when that needle, or when the arm moves because the vacuum pulls that diaphragm against it, the needle's going to drop under gravity and whatever little bit of pressure is in the fuel tank, and that allows the fuel to flow. Also note that this arm is adjusted so that it's below the deck here. It's basically flush with the surface inside the carburetor here. So it was pretty common as parts got harder and harder to find for these old things for guys to try and do creative stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it does not. So this whole assembly is retained by this screw right at the back here. So carefully break that loose and spin it out. Now there's a spring underneath this arm, so you gotta, I like to put my thumb over it, because if that spring goes flying, then you're stuck looking for a spring, because not everybody has an extra laying around on the bench. Trying to be careful to keep from mixing up the parts between these two carburetors here. Yeah, see that needle, that's more like something you'd find on a Super XL or a 925. I think this was an act of desperation to find something that would work in this carburetor. There's the spring. Now, these seats can be a real pain in the neck to get out, and I don't know if my standard 5/16 socket is going to fit down in there. Oh baby, just barely. So I'm going to take this out initially because I want to look at it and make sure that it matches the seat that's supposed to be in there. If it does, we'll put the new needle, or we'll use the needle from this 141 carburetor, and we'll save Chantz a little bit of expense here. I do have a new needle and seat that I had in stock, but if a used one will work. Okay, so there's a little, you won't be able to see it more than likely, but there's a brass sealing washer down in there, and then the seat, the needle drops in there, and that is a rubber sealing surface, and that's still pretty pliable. It doesn't look torn up, it doesn't look dirty. So let's compare it to a NOS one. Exactly the same. Looks exactly the way it should, so that's good. I think I can use the needle from the parts carburetor here, but I want to get this back in. Like I say, I don't want to mix up parts. You want to be very careful not to cross thread anything on one of these carb bodies, or you're stuck with a piece of junk. that you can't do anything with. You don't want to strip it out either. Okay, well, let's get the needle assembly out of this one. The parts lists I have indicate that this stuff is interchangeable. And by the way, folks, I've got all those posted on my website, leonschainsawpartsandrepair.com. The carburetor IPLs, all of the ones that I have are there on the website. All of my chainsaw parts lists, IPLs, they're all there. So when you need some information, don't be shy, go find it. They're all set up as PDF files. You can download them, save copies. Yeah, exactly the same. So, I'm going to luck out here, it looks like. So again, you see this needle does not have a means to attach to the metering arm like the one that came out of there did. Now the height here is almost the same. This would have almost worked had the right arm been in there, and this could have bounced back and forth. But being indexed into the arm the way it was allowing it to sit just so high. So you just drop that in, and even though I don't want to, I'll put these back with this carb. Part of me wants to use the needle, this arm that I know is correct, but at the same time, that's a multi-purpose arm. So they had a revision somewhere along the parts run, and they added this for some carburetor that did require it to be indexed that way. But we'll go ahead and use it with the spring that came from it. So in this case, you just want to set that on there. The little bump out in this arm goes on the spring, and guide that down as you put your pivot pin in. Just kind of be gentle, go slow, make sure it's in the arm itself. This is another one, you don't want to cross thread the damn thing. Good enough. Okay, so now you can see that that is sitting flush. When the vacuum depresses, causes the diaphragm to press the lever, it's going to allow that needle to drop, which I can see it doing. There's no way I can show you that on video, but it is working properly. So, I'm going to get this all put back together, get it back on the saw, and try and do a test run. I have a feeling the issue has been dealt with. So anyway, folks, when you're working on these old carbs, it can be a real challenge sometimes to find the right parts, but take the time to try and source them, because you can run into, one little detail can make all the difference in the world, and it can be extraordinarily frustrating trying to get one of these things to run when that little detail is off. Alright, well, every once in a while you find the problem and it works out great. So that metering lever setup was what was wrong. Proof's in that beautiful racket that thing was making. My neighbors may hate me right now, but this started on about 6 poles. Had to open up the low-speed needle quite a bit. I know it had been tuned down to try and stop it from flooding out, which of course now that it's not doing that, we're set. So, Chantz, I'll be getting a hold of you. This one I think is ready for me to drain the fuel and send back to you to continue your restoration.